I died at 29 in a hospital bed, alone except for the nurse who checked my vitals one last time. My boyfriend of 7 years, Kevin Zhang, was at a resort in Bali with his friend Lily Chen. The trip I'd funded by working 3 jobs while he focused on his startup. The last message I sent him before my heart gave out from exhaustion and untreated pneumonia was, "I'm in the hospital. Please come." He replied 4 hours later, "Can't leave now. We're in the middle of investor meetings. You're always so dramatic about being sick. Take some medicine and rest." There were no investor meetings. There was just Kevin and Lily on the beach, my money funding their romantic getaway while I died believing I was supporting his dream. My name is Maya Chen, and I spent 7 years being Kevin's unpaid assistant, emotional support system, an ATM while he told everyone I was just his study partner, his friend, his helpful colleague. Every time I asked about our relationship status, he said I was being clingy. Every time I questioned his time with Lily, he said I was jealous. Every time I asked for acknowledgement of my contributions, he said I was materialistic. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in heaven or a morgue. I was 22, sitting in an exam hall at Beijing University, staring at the final exam that would determine my graduate school placement. The same exam where, in my previous life, I'd bombed spectacularly because I'd spent the night before helping Kevin finish his thesis instead of studying. This time I knew every answer. Not because I'd studied, though I would have, but because I'd lived through the consequences of failing this exam. In my previous timeline, my poor scores meant I couldn't get into the graduate program I wanted. I'd taken a job as a teaching assistant instead, which is how I'd gotten trapped in Kevin's orbit. He was the grad student I was assigned to help. This time, I filled out the exam with perfect confidence. Every question, every equation, every analysis, I knew it all. Not just from memory, but from 7 years of watching Kevin take credit for work I'd done, 7 years of explaining concepts to him that I'd then watch him present as his own understanding. I finished with 30 minutes to spare. Around me, other students were still frantically scribbling. I glanced 3 rows over and saw Kevin, his face scrunched in concentration, clearly struggling with the material. In my previous life, I would have felt sorry for him, would have wished I could help, would have already been planning how to comfort him after the exam when he inevitably complained about how hard it was. This time, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction as I handed in my paper and walked out. 3 weeks later, results were posted. I'd scored in the top 1% nationally. Full scholarship offers came from 5 prestigious programs. Job offers from 3 major companies. Everything I'd never had in my previous life, because I'd sabotaged my own success to support someone who'd never even acknowledged I existed. Kevin, predictably, had barely passed. He'd qualify for the graduate program, but without funding, without prestige, without any of the opportunities that had come so easily to him in our previous timeline when he'd had me doing his work. I was in the department office reviewing my scholarship offers when he found me. "Maya. Oh my God, I heard you totally crushed the exam. That's amazing." His smile was wide, friendly, completely fabricated. "I was actually hoping to talk to you. I did okay on the test, but not great, and I heard you got into the advanced program. I was thinking maybe we could study together next semester? Help each other out." Every word was calculated. In our previous timeline, this exact conversation had been the beginning. He'd approached me with that same humble, friendly energy. I'd been flattered that a popular, charismatic guy like Kevin wanted to study with me. I'd said yes immediately. I hadn't realized until much later that help each other meant I did all the work while he took all the credit. "I'm actually pretty booked with my research fellowship," I said without looking up from the papers. "I don't think I'll have time for study groups." "Oh, come on. Don't be like that." He pulled up a chair uninvited, leaning in with that conspiratorial smile. "We could be a great team. You're clearly brilliant with the technical stuff, and I'm really good with people and presentations. We'd complement each other perfectly." Translation: you do the work, I'll take the credit and make connections. "I don't need a team," I said. "I work better alone." Kevin's smile faltered. "Are you sure? Because I heard Professor Wang is looking for research assistants for his AI project, and I was thinking if we applied together." "I already have a position with Professor Wang," I interrupted. He offered it to me yesterday based on my exam scores. This was a lie. Professor Wang hadn't offered me anything yet. But I knew from my previous timeline that he would, and I knew that Kevin had desperately wanted that position. Had spent our entire first year of grad school complaining that I'd somehow stolen his opportunity when Professor Wang chose me over him. Except in my previous life, Kevin had still benefited because he'd convinced me to share all my research with him, to include him in my meetings with Professor Wang, to essentially give him access to everything he wanted without him having to earn it. Kevin's expression shifted. A flash of something ugly before the mask came back up. Wow. That's really great for you, Maya. But you know, grad school isn't just about individual achievement. It's about collaboration, networking, building relationships. You might want to think about being a little more open to working with others. I am open to working with others, I said, finally looking at him directly. Just not with you. His face went through surprise, confusion, and then calculated vulnerability. Did I do something to offend you? Because if I did, I'm really sorry. I just thought. You didn't do anything, I said. I just know your type. And I'm not interested. I left him sitting there, probably planning his next angle of approach. Over the next month, Kevin tried everything. He showed up at the library where I studied, always with questions that somehow required extensive help. He joined the same research groups I was in, then consistently forgot to do his portions of group work until I had to cover for him to keep the project moving. He befriended my roommate and started showing up at our apartment with takeout, acting like we were all old friends. Most insidiously, he started dating Lily Chen publicly, a pretty bubbly undergraduate who followed him around campus like a puppy. He made sure I saw them together constantly, always touching, always laughing, always radiating the kind of easy romantic relationship he'd never given me in our previous timeline. I knew exactly what he was doing, making me feel like I was missing out, like I'd rejected something valuable, like I'd been too harsh or too judgmental. And look what I could have had if I'd just been nicer. It didn't work. I'd lived through 7 years of being Kevin's secret support system while Lily was his public girlfriend. I'd watched them post couple photos while I stayed up all night finishing his work. I'd listened to him complain about relationship problems with her, while I handed him the thesis chapters I'd written for him. This time, watching them together just made me grateful I'd gotten out before getting in. Professor Wang's research project consumed my attention. We were developing a new machine learning algorithm, and for the first time in either of my lives, I was doing work that was entirely mine. No one to share credit with. No one to dilute my contributions. Just me, the research, and the pure satisfaction of intellectual achievement. 6 months into the program, Professor Wang called me into his office. Maya, I want to talk to you about something. There's a student who's been asking me repeatedly if you'd be willing to collaborate with him on his thesis project. Kevin Zhang. Do you know him? I know him. He seems to think you two have some kind of partnership or understanding. He's been quite persistent, actually. Showing up at my office hours, sending emails, even trying to attend meetings you're in. Professor Wang's expression was carefully neutral. I wanted to hear your perspective before I responded. We don't have any partnership or understanding, I said firmly. I've told him directly that I'm not interested in working with him. If he's claiming otherwise, he's lying. Professor Wang nodded slowly. I thought that might be the case. His thesis advisor contacted me yesterday asking for your research data, because apparently Kevin told him you'd agreed to share it. I wanted to verify before I shut that down. My blood ran cold. He told his advisor I'd agreed to share my data? Yes. I've already informed his advisor that no such agreement exists, and that our research data is proprietary to this project. But Maya, you should know that Kevin has been telling people you two are research partners, that you've been collaborating closely, and that any work you're doing is joint work. The audacity was staggering. Even though I'd lived through worse in my previous timeline, he's trying to claim credit for work he hasn't done. That's my assessment as well, which is why I wanted to warn you. This kind of behavior tends to escalate. Document everything, keep records of all your work, and don't share anything with him. If he approaches you again, I want to know about it. After leaving Professor Wang's office, I went straight to the department administrator and filed a formal statement declaring that I had no research partnership with Kevin Zhang and requesting that my work not be shared with him under any circumstances. The administrator, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Mrs. Liu, listened to my statement and then said, "You're not the first person to come in here with concerns about Kevin." "I'm not." 2 undergraduate students filed complaints last semester, said he pressured them to do his coursework and then threatened their grades when they refused. Nothing we could prove definitively, but there's a pattern. She stamped my statement officially. "Keep this documentation. If he tries anything, you'll need it." That evening, Kevin was waiting outside my apartment when I got home. "We need to talk," he said, his friendly mask completely gone. "We don't have anything to talk about. You went to Professor Wang and told him we're not partners? You filed a statement with the department." His voice was rising. "What the hell is your problem, Maya?" "My problem is that you've been lying to people, claiming we have a partnership that doesn't exist, and trying to access research you didn't work on." "I wasn't lying. I thought we had an understanding." "We don't. I've told you that repeatedly. You chose not to listen." "You're being incredibly selfish," Kevin said, switching tactics to wounded indignation. "Do you know how competitive grad school is? How hard it is to get good research opportunities? I thought you of all people would understand that, and be willing to help someone out. Help you out by doing your work for you and letting you take credit? No thanks." "That's not what I was asking for." "That's exactly what you were asking for. And when I said no, you tried to go around me by lying to my advisor." I kept my voice level. "Stay away from me, Kevin. Stop telling people we're partners. Stop trying to access my research. Just leave me alone." "You're going to regret this," he said, and there was real venom in his voice now. "You think you're so smart, but you don't understand how things work. Nobody succeeds alone in this field. You need connections, you need people to like you, you need to know how to play the game. And you're burning bridges left and right. If your game involves stealing other people's work, I'm happy to burn that bridge." I went inside and locked the door, my hands shaking with adrenaline. Not from fear, but from rage. In my previous life, Kevin had said similar things to me dozens of times, and I'd believed him. I'd thought I needed him, needed his social skills and connections and charm to succeed. I'd let him convince me that my contributions were less valuable than his people skills. Now I understood the truth. Kevin had no actual skills. What he had was audacity, manipulation, and a talent for finding people willing to do his work for him. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of messages. My roommate Jen burst into my room holding her phone. "Maya, what the hell happened with you and Kevin?" "What do you mean?" "He posted on the grad student forum last night, calling you out for being uncooperative and elitist, saying you're hoarding research opportunities, and refusing to help other students." She showed me her phone. The post was long, detailed, and devastatingly effective. Kevin had painted himself as a struggling student who just wanted help, and me as an arrogant, competitive, selfish person who'd gone out of her way to sabotage him, and then bragged about it to the professor. He'd framed my boundary setting as aggression, my refusal to be exploited as elitism, and people were believing it. The comments were full of grad students I'd never met talking about how competitive students like me were what was wrong with academia, how we needed to be more collaborative, how success should be about community, not individual achievement. "Are you okay?" Jen asked. "Because some of this is really harsh." I read through the comments, feeling a familiar sickness in my stomach. This was the power Kevin had, the ability to make people see him as the victim even when he was the predator. In my previous life, he'd used this same tactic countless times, turning our friend group against anyone who questioned him, making me feel like I had to defend him constantly to prove I wasn't the bad guy everyone thought I was. "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't. "It's all lies, but I don't know how to prove that without looking defensive." "Mrs. Liu from the department office called while you were sleeping. She said to come see her as soon as possible." At the department office, Mrs. Liu had printed out Kevin's entire post along with the comment thread. "I've forwarded this to the dean," she said. "This is targeted harassment. He's deliberately trying to damage your reputation because you refuse to let him exploit you. But everyone believes him, I said. All those comments are from people who don't have the full context. But we do. We have your statement, Professor Wang's account, the complaints from the undergraduates, and now this public attack. Mrs. Liu's expression was grim. Kevin has done this before, Maya. The pattern is clear. And this time, we have enough to act on it. Over the next week, the department launched a formal investigation into Kevin's academic conduct. They interviewed the undergraduate students who'd filed complaints. They reviewed his coursework and discovered significant inconsistencies suggesting plagiarism. They examined his thesis proposal and found large sections copied from published papers. I wasn't supposed to know about most of this. It was confidential during the investigation. But Mrs. Liu kept me informed because I'd been his target. The thing is, she told me one afternoon, Kevin is very good at finding people who will do his work for him. The undergraduates he pressured, the study groups he manipulated, the girlfriends he used. You're the first person who said no early and documented it. That's why his attack on you was so vicious. You escaped before he could trap you. I knew what he was, I said quietly. I'd seen it before. Mrs. Liu looked at me curiously, but didn't ask for clarification. The investigation concluded that Kevin had violated academic integrity policies in multiple ways. He was suspended for a semester and placed on academic probation. His thesis proposal was rejected, and he would have to start over under strict supervision. The best part? The department sent an official email to all grad students clarifying that accusations of non-collaboration were not grounds for harassment, that students had no obligation to share research, and that targeted social media campaigns against other students were violations of conduct policies. They didn't name Kevin specifically, but everyone knew who they were talking about. Kevin disappeared from campus for the rest of the semester. His forum post was deleted. Students who'd supported him in the comments quietly stopped talking about it. And Lily Chun, his girlfriend, showed up at the library one afternoon and asked if we could talk. I don't know if you remember me, she started. I remember. In my previous timeline, Lily had been Kevin's public girlfriend for 7 years while I'd been his hidden support system. I'd hated her irrationally, thinking she was the one keeping Kevin from committing to me. Only later did I realize she'd been just as much a victim of his manipulation as I was. Kevin and I broke up after the investigation, she said. I found out he'd been using me too, telling people I was helping with his research when I'd never even read his thesis, taking me to department events and introducing me as his partner, so people would think he was more accomplished than he was. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be. I should have seen it sooner. Lily sat down across from me. I'm actually here because I wanted to apologize to you. Kevin told me you were obsessed with him, that you were jealous of our relationship and trying to sabotage his career because he rejected you. I believed him and I helped him spread that narrative. In my previous life, this exact dynamic had played out, except I'd never known about it until it was too late. Kevin had kept me and Lily separate, feeding us both different stories, using each of us against the other. It's not your fault, I said. He's good at manipulation. You knew though. From the beginning, you saw through him. How? I couldn't exactly explain that I'd lived through 7 years of his abuse before getting a second chance. I guess I just recognized the pattern, the immediate intensity, the attempts to make me feel special and obligated, the way he framed helping him as helping myself. Lily nodded slowly. I wish I'd been that smart. I wasted 2 years on him. At least you got out after 2 instead of 7, I said without thinking. 7. Just a guess. He seems like the type who'd string someone along for years. After Lily left, I sat in the library thinking about the 2 timelines. In one, Lily and I had been enemies, divided by Kevin's lies. In this one, we were 2 women who'd both escaped the same predator. The semester ended with my research project winning a national competition. Professor Wang and I were invited to present at an international conference. Job offers started coming in from companies I'd only dreamed of working for in my previous life. Kevin, meanwhile, had withdrawn from the grad program entirely. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved back to his hometown, telling everyone that academia was too political, and he'd been pushed out by jealous colleagues. I felt no sympathy, only relief that I'd stopped his pattern early, before he could trap another victim the way he'd trapped me for 7 years. 2 years into my PhD program, I was at a coffee shop working on a paper when someone sat down across from me without asking. I looked up, ready to tell them the seat was taken, and froze. It was Kevin. He looked different, older, harder, with none of the charismatic charm that had once made him so dangerous. "Hi, Maya. What do you want?" I wanted to apologize. For everything. For how I treated you, for the forum post, for trying to steal your research. I was in a bad place and I took it out on you unfairly. Every word was a lie. Not because Kevin didn't mean them. He probably did believe he was being sincere, but because he fundamentally didn't understand what he'd actually done wrong. He thought he was apologizing for being mean or aggressive. He had no concept of the systematic exploitation he'd attempted. "Okay," I said neutrally. "I've been doing a lot of therapy, working on myself. And I realize now that I had a lot of entitlement issues, a lot of problems with boundaries." He gave me what he probably thought was a self-deprecating smile. "I'm trying to be better." "That's good. Everyone should work on themselves." I was actually hoping we could talk. Clear the air properly. Maybe even, he hesitated, like he was being brave. Maybe even be friends again? We were never friends, I thought. You tried to make me your unpaid servant and I said no. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "But I hope therapy continues to be helpful for you." Kevin's mask slipped just slightly. "You're still holding a grudge? After I just apologized." "I'm not holding a grudge. I'm making a boundary. There's a difference. It's been 2 years, Maya. At some point you have to let things go and move on." "I have moved on. That's why I don't need you in my life." His expression darkened. "You know, this is exactly why you don't have any friends. Why everyone thinks you're cold and difficult to work with. You can't forgive, you can't collaborate, you're just—" "I need you to leave now," I interrupted. "And I need you to not contact me again. I'm just trying to be mature about this. You're trying to manipulate me into accepting your apology so you can feel like the good guy. I don't owe you that. Leave." A barista was watching us now, alert to potential conflict. Kevin noticed and stood up, smoothing his expression back into wounded dignity. "I hope someday you figure out that success isn't everything," he said. "And that pushing everyone away won't make you happy." After he left, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of him showing up and trying once again to make me the villain in a story where he'd been the predator. I called Mrs. Liu and reported the contact, just in case. "Do you feel unsafe?" she asked immediately. "No. Just angry. He tried to make me feel guilty for not accepting his apology." That's classic abuser behavior. They apologize not because they're sorry, but because they want to regain access to their victim. Mrs. Liu's voice was firm. "Document this conversation. And if he shows up again, call campus security immediately." He didn't show up again. But I heard through mutual acquaintances that Kevin had started telling people he'd tried to reconcile with me, and I'd been irrationally hostile, that I was still vindictive about something that happened years ago, that I clearly had anger issues. The smear campaign was smaller this time. He had fewer connections, less credibility, but it still stung to know people believed it. What helped was that I had my own reputation now. A reputation built on my actual work, my actual achievements, my actual relationships with people who knew me. When someone would mention Kevin's version of events, someone else would counter with, "That doesn't sound like Maya at all. She's always been professional and collaborative." My work spoke louder than his lies. 3 years into my PhD, I published a paper that became one of the most cited in my field. Professor Wang and I were invited to consult for a major tech company on their AI ethics framework. I was offered a postdoctoral position at Stanford before I'd even finished my dissertation. I was at the department's graduate celebration, celebrating with Jen and other friends I'd made, when Lily found me again. "I wanted to show you something," she said, pulling out her phone. "Do you remember how Kevin used to say I was helping with his research even though I wasn't?" "I remember." "Well, after we broke up, I actually started studying data science properly, and I just got accepted into a master's program. Her face was glowing with genuine joy. I wanted to thank you. Watching you stand up to him, watching you refuse to let him use you, it made me realize I didn't have to accept being used either. You did that yourself. All I did was set a boundary. Sometimes that's all it takes. Seeing someone else set a boundary makes you realize you can too. After she left, I thought about my previous timeline, about the Maya who'd spent 7 years being Kevin's support system, his ghost writer, his emotional dumping ground, about how I died alone in a hospital, exhausted and used up, while he vacationed with his girlfriend on my money. That Maya had believed that love meant sacrifice, that supporting someone meant erasing yourself, that saying no made you selfish. This Maya knew better. 5 years after that exam, I was Dr. Maya Chin, with a PhD from Beijing University, a position at a top research institute, and 3 published papers that were changing conversations in my field. I'd built genuine friendships with people who valued me for myself. I'd learned to set boundaries without guilt. I'd proven that success wasn't about who you exploited, but about what you actually created. Kevin, I heard through the occasional gossip, had gone through 3 more grad programs, getting kicked out of each for academic integrity issues. He'd burned every bridge, alienated every potential mentor, and was currently working at his family's business back in his hometown. The trajectory of our lives had completely reversed from my first timeline. Not because I'd sabotaged him, but because I'd simply refused to prop him up. I was at an international conference presenting my research when someone approached me after my talk. Dr. Chun? I'm Professor Martinez from MIT. Your work is fascinating. I'd love to talk to you about a potential collaboration. As we discussed research possibilities, I thought about that exam day 5 years ago. About the moment I'd woken up with a second chance and perfect knowledge of every answer. The top score hadn't just gotten me into grad school. It had given me options, opportunities, a foundation to build from. It had made me someone people wanted to work with because of my actual value, not someone they could exploit because I was desperate. But more importantly, it had taught me something crucial. The right answer wasn't always the one that helped other people. Sometimes the right answer was the one that helped yourself. Kevin had wanted me to fail that exam in my previous life, though he'd never said so directly. He'd just kept me up all night helping with his thesis, knowing I had my own test in the morning, not caring that my exhaustion would cost me my future. This time, I'd chosen myself. And that choice had saved my life. Not just literally, though it had certainly prevented me from working myself to death supporting someone else's dreams. But it had saved me from a life of being used, of being diminished, of believing that my value came from what I could do for others rather than what I could do for myself. 6 months after the conference, Professor Martinez and I published a joint paper that won a major award. The press release mentioned my background, top scores at Beijing University, groundbreaking research in AI ethics, rising star in my field. Jen sent me a screenshot of Kevin's social media response. Crazy how some people get all the opportunities while actually talented people get pushed aside. Academia is so corrupt. Do you want to respond? Jen texted. No. His bitterness isn't my problem. Because it wasn't. Kevin's failure wasn't because I'd succeeded. It was because his entire strategy had been built on using other people. When those people said no, he had nothing to fall back on. I'd learned that lesson in the hardest way possible. Dying alone, having given everything to someone who'd given nothing back. This time, I'd learned it early enough to change my trajectory. And in doing so, I'd stopped being Kevin's victim and started being my own hero. That was the real top score. Not the exam results, but the grade I'd given myself on knowing my own worth. 7 years after rebirth, on the anniversary of the day I'd died in my previous timeline, I was offered a full professorship at a prestigious university. At 29, the age I'd died before, I was beginning my career instead of ending my life. The night before I was supposed to accept the position, I had a dream about my previous life, about working 3 jobs to fund Kevin's startup, about collapsing from exhaustion, about dying alone while he enjoyed my money with someone else. I woke up crying, but not from sadness. From gratitude. Grateful for the second chance. Grateful that I'd been smart enough to use it. Grateful that I'd had the courage to choose myself even when it would have been easier to fall back into old patterns. At the celebration dinner for my new position, Professor Wang raised his glass to Dr. Chen, who proved that the best collaborator is sometimes yourself, and that knowing your worth is more important than being liked. Everyone drank, and as I looked around the table at genuine friends, supportive colleagues, and opportunities I'd earned through my own work, I thought about Kevin one last time. He'd tried to use me for his lover, his career, his advancement. He'd expected me to sacrifice my potential to elevate his mediocrity. Instead, I'd shocked him by doing the simplest, most radical thing possible. I'd said no. And that single word, backed up by consistent boundaries and self-respect, had changed everything. I'd scored top marks on that exam. But the real test had been whether I'd choose myself or someone else's exploitation. I'd passed. And the reward was the life I was now living. A life built on my own merit, my own work, my own worth. Kevin could never understand that the opportunities he thought were handed to me were actually earned through refusing to hand mine to him. That was the shock. Not that I succeeded, but that I didn't need him to do it. And I never would.